They're always there, watching your stories, viewing your posts, but never saying a word. You notice them sometimes. The silent ones who never like, never comment, never engage. And maybe if you're honest, you're one of them. You scroll through endless feeds, faces smiling, voices shouting, people performing their happiness, and yet you remain in the shadows. You feel things deeply, but you don't react. You see everything, but say nothing. You tell yourself it's just social media. It doesn't matter. But somewhere beneath that calm, there's something else. A quiet exhaustion, a distrust, a subtle fear of being seen, or worse, misunderstood. Because silence online often mirrors silence in life, and in a world obsessed with expression, those who stay quiet are rarely understood. So what's really behind this quiet observation? Is it introversion, detachment, or something darker? A kind of invisible armor, built from years of emotional overexposure? In this video, we're not here to judge your silence. We're here to decode it. We'll uncover the dark psychology of people who watch but never engage, the childhood conditioning, the social fatigue, the subconscious defense that shapes this digital invisibility. And by the end, you might see that your silence was never laziness or indifference. It was self-preservation. So if you've ever felt unseen or chosen to disappear on purpose, stay, because this video will show you something most people never realize. Sometimes the ones who say nothing understand everything. You scroll, you read, you watch, but your finger always hesitates on that tiny heart icon. That single act of engagement that feels too exposing. It's not that you don't feel something. You do. You feel deeply. You see the patterns in people's posts, the small cries for attention, dressed up as jokes, the subtle competition hiding behind selfies. You notice what others miss, because you're not performing. You're watching. But here's what's fascinating. Psychologically, silent observers like you often live with two opposing forces: a hunger to connect and a fear of being seen. You crave authenticity, yet you know that on social media, authenticity rarely survives. Every post feels like a mask, every caption a tiny sales pitch for acceptance. So instead, you choose to stay in the shadows, not because you don't belong, but because you can't stand the performance. You tell yourself, I don't need to post. I know who I am, but deep down, part of you wonders if you've gone invisible, if silence has become both your shield and your prison. And here's the unsettling part. Psychologists suggest that people who watch but never engage often do so out of self-protection. They've been judged before, mocked for expressing themselves, or maybe they've simply learned that attention isn't the same as connection. So you stay quiet, you study people, you understand them, perhaps more than they understand themselves. But what if, and think about this, what if staying invisible has been your way of keeping control? Because in silence, no one can attack you, no one can reject you, and no one can truly know you. That's the paradox of the observer. You see everything, yet remain unseen. And maybe so, that's exactly how you like it. You tell yourself it's peace, no drama, no noise, no need to prove anything. Just you, quietly watching from the shadows, unseen, untouched, above the chaos. You scroll through the endless highlight reels, the filtered smiles, the desperate attempts for attention, and you think, I'm glad I'm not like them. You tell yourself you're different, more grounded, more real. But deep down, you know that's only half the truth, because silence comes with a price. When you stop expressing yourself, something subtle begins to die, not instantly, but slowly, quietly, like a candle that runs out of oxygen. You start fading, not from existence, but from reflection. You see, humans don't truly know themselves in isolation. We understand who we are through mirrors, through reactions, emotions, conversations, even disagreements. Every time we express a thought or feeling, the world reflects it back, helping us to find the blurry edges of who we are. But when you choose to watch and never engage, you lose those mirrors, like you stop getting reflected. You stop being seen. At first, that feels safe, like control. You don't risk embarrassment. You don't get hurt. You don't have to pretend. But slowly, that safety starts to rot into loneliness. And then loneliness hardens into detachment. You start believing you're above it all. You tell yourself others are fake, shallow, addicted to validation. Maybe some are, but that quiet voice inside, the one that whispers in the silence, says something uncomfortable. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even notice? That's the hidden tragedy of invisibility. You think you're protecting yourself from judgment, But what you're really protecting yourself from is connection. Psychologically, this is what Carl Jung might have called the shadow of the observer, the part of you that uses distance to feel superior, yet secretly aches for belonging. In modern psychology, it's known as detached participation, when you're there but not in it. You consume life without ever tasting it. You scroll through emotions, opinions, and art, but never let them touch you. You study others like a scientist observing a specimen. You think you've seen through it all. But seeing through everything can also mean never seeing into anything. And the reason the most quiet observers stay silent isn't arrogance, it's exhaustion. You've probably been misunderstood before. You've spoken your truth once and it fell flat. You've tried to open up, only to be met with indifference or mockery. So you learn to retreat, to become the watcher. But here's the paradox. By avoiding rejection, you also avoid recognition. By protecting your peace, you isolate your soul. By refusing to perform, you deny your voice. And that voice, buried beneath layers of observation, still wants to be heard. It wants to express, to connect, to exist. So yes, staying silent protects you, but it also erases you, pixel by pixel, day by day, until one morning you wake up and feel like a ghost scrolling through other people's lives. Maybe it's not attention you truly crave. Maybe it's resonance, the feeling that someone out there gets it. You weren't born silent. You didn't come into this world afraid to be seen. As a child, you laughed loudly, spoke freely, asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. You existed without hesitation, but somewhere along the way, you learned the cost of being visible. Maybe your parents dismissed your feelings, told you were too sensitive, too much, or overreacting. Maybe you were ridiculed in school for being different, for standing out, for saying something that didn't fit the crowd. Maybe every time you opened your heart, someone shut it a little tighter, so you adapted. You made a quiet deal with yourself. If I stop showing too much of who I am, I'll stop getting hurt. That's where invisibility begins, not as a choice, but as a survival strategy. You learned to watch before you spoke, to read the room before revealing anything real, to stay agreeable, neutral, invisible, because that's how you stayed safe. And on the surface, it worked. You avoided conflict, you stayed unnoticed. You didn't give anyone ammo to use against you. But underneath that safety, something else started dying, your aliveness. Every time you swallowed a thought, bit your tongue, or pretended not to care, a small part of your soul dimmed. You didn't just hide your pain, you hid your personality. Psychologists call this self-silencing, the learned belief that your authenticity is dangerous. It's a deep emotional reflex born from early experiences where expressing yourself led to punishment, shame, or abandonment. So now, as an adult, you stay quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because your nervous system remembers what happened the last time you spoke up, that tension you feel when you want to comment but don't, that hesitation before posting something real. It's not laziness, it's conditioning. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That means the invisible rules you live by, don't speak, don't feel, don't need, aren't truth. They're ghosts from your past whispering through your behavior. You're not naturally reserved, you're trained to be. You're not just observing. You're protecting yourself from wounds that never healed. And this is the cruel irony of trauma. It teaches you to mistake silence for peace when it's actually suppression. It convinces you that detachment is strength when it's really fear dressed as wisdom. But here's the deeper truth. The fact that you watch means you still care. You still want to connect. You still crave meaning. You still ache to be understood, even if you've convinced yourself otherwise. And maybe you've reached that quiet point in life where you're tired, not just of people, but of being unseen. You want to speak again, but don't know how. You want to express, but feel rusty, like your emotions are a language you forgot how to speak. That's because your silence isn't who you are. It's who you became to survive, and survival is noble. But you weren't meant to stay there forever. Every observer has a story, and maybe your story, Psyche, the one you've been holding back, could be the very thing that saves someone else from their own silence. But first, you need to face the reason you chose invisibility. You need to meet the part of you that decided, I'll just watch, because that part still believes the world will hurt you if it sees you. And until you show compassion to that wound, you'll keep living behind the glass, safe, silent, unseen. You think your silence protects you, but in truth, it slowly isolates you. You start believing that no one really understands you. That if people truly knew how much you think, feel, or notice, they'd either judge you or walk away. So you stay quiet. You become the listener in every room, the one who absorbs everyone's emotions but never reveals your own. You watch others speak their truth, post their thoughts, express their chaos, and you wonder, how can they be so free? But what you don't realize is that your quietness has built invisible walls around you. You tell yourself you're just private, that you don't need to share to feel whole. But deep down, a quieter voice whispers, "No one ever asked what I needed." You learned to read people before they spoke, because it was safer to predict moods than to express your own. You became emotionally intelligent, but emotionally invisible. You can understand others deeply, yet feel unseen by everyone. And that's where loneliness grows, not from being alone, but from being unknowable. No one can truly love you if they only know the version of you that hides behind calmness and control. Because calmness, when it's built on fear, is just emotional armor. It keeps the world out, but it also keeps you in. Here's the dark truth. When you live unseen for too long, you begin to confuse invisibility with peace. You convince yourself that keeping distance protects you from disappointment, but really, it protects you from connection. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. The more you wear it, the more the real you fades into the background. You start living life as a projection, not a person. Think about it. How many times have you smiled when you were actually in pain? How many times have you typed, "I'm fine," knowing you were breaking inside? How many times have you scrolled through life, quietly watching others live, while you remained in emotional exile? It's not that you don't want connection. You just don't trust it anymore. Because every time you tried, it cost you something. So now you choose safety over intimacy, silence over truth, observation over participation. But here's what Jung and your own shadow would want you to see. The same walls that protect you also suffocate you. They don't just keep out pain, they keep out love, growth, and the chance to finally be understood. And this is the turning point, the part most people never reach. Because it's easier to stay silent than to risk rejection. Easier to analyze others than to reveal yourself. Easier to watch life than to live it. But you, the one who's been watching, the one who understands everything but shares nothing, you're not weak. You're just tired of fighting battles that no one ever saw. Your silence was once your superpower, but now it's your prison. And the only way out is to make peace with the parts of you that hid in the first place. Because the world doesn't need another perfect persona. It needs the real you, the one who feels deeply, sees everything, and still chooses to speak. There comes a moment, quiet, fragile, and almost unnoticeable, when something inside you finally says, "I can't keep pretending I'm fine." It doesn't happen in some grand epiphany or cinematic breakdown. It happens in silence. Maybe one night when you're scrolling through people's perfect lives, and a sudden ache whispers, "I've been missing from my own story." That's the moment your healing begins, not when you post, not when you shout your truth to the world, but when you stop hiding it from yourself. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's what this moment is, the start of seeing your darkness, not as an enemy, but as the lost child within you, still waiting to be understood. You realize the crazy, lazy, or quiet versions of you were never defects. They were defenses. They were the mind's way of surviving a world that didn't listen. But now, you don't want to just survive. You want to feel alive. And here's the beautiful, brutal truth. When you start embracing your shadow, the world may not clap. People might pull away because you no longer fit the version of you that kept them comfortable. But that's okay, because for the first time, you'll be real. You'll speak without overthinking how it sounds. You'll say no without guilt. You'll show up, messy and unsure, and that will be the most honest version of you yet. Because the goal was never to be perfect. It was to stop being invisible. The past that shaped you, the silence, the pain, the people who looked right through you, they all carved out the empathy and depth that now make you different. You're not too quiet, you're just deep in a world that fears depth. You're not too sensitive, you're just awake in a society that numbs itself. You're not broken, you're becoming whole. So the next time you catch yourself scrolling in silence, watching others live while your soul whispers to be seen, remember this. Your story deserves to exist outside your head. Your thoughts are not too much. Your emotions are not a burden. They are the proof that you are still alive. The moment you decide to be seen, the world doesn't suddenly change. You do. And that's enough to begin everything again. Because the greatest rebellion in a world obsessed with noise is not to disappear into silence, but to finally say, "This is who I am, and I'm done hiding." You've probably noticed something. This video wasn't really about social media. It was about you. About the version of you that got tired of being misunderstood, tired of explaining your depth to shallow conversations, tired of performing happiness for people who never really looked at you. You learned to go quiet, not because you had nothing to say, but because you were waiting for someone who could truly listen. And maybe this was your sign, because your silence was never weakness. It was the training ground of your awareness. While the world screamed to be seen, you were busy seeing. You were observing the lies, the masks, the desperate need for validation, and realizing deep down that there must be something truer than this noise. Carl Jung would say, "Your shadow has been preparing you. The parts you hide have been gathering strength, and one day when you're ready, your quiet will not be silence anymore. It will be power. So maybe you don't need to post. Maybe you don't need to shout. Maybe your revolution begins in whispers. The quiet decision to finally live, not to perform. Because the truth is, you were never just watching others, you were studying the world. And now, you're ready to return to it consciously. And if this video spoke to you, not just to your mind, but to that quiet ache inside, then you already know. You're not the observer anymore. You're awakening. So tell me, have you ever felt like the invisible one? The one who sees everything, but is seen by no one? Leave your story below, because somewhere out there, someone like you is reading, and realizing they were never alone. This is Psyche Alchemy, where darkness isn't something to fear,